Good evening, everybody. This is WA7 PBE Patrick here with another episode 3 of the Operator of the Week podcast. I'm very excited about the show. We're going to be talking about the M17 project. And just a couple of quick updates. If you haven't seen my Patreon, buy me a coffee, it's in the links below. Also, be sure to check these guys out. I put the link to their website below as well. And if you haven't got on my TikTok, check that out too. I do a lot of live streams of I put activations on there because it gets a little bit more views than YouTube. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my guests. We have Ed, N2XDD, and Steve, KC1AWV from the M17 project. How are you all doing this evening?
Good, Pat. How are you?
Doing great. So I guess we'll start with you, Ed, since you're on top. How'd you get in the ham radio?
Let's see. I've been licensed about 28 years. So probably about a year or so after they dropped the no code, code requirement, I finally took my license. But I started out probably about 4 or 5 years old, listening to a crystal scanner, listening to the local fire department. Then I got a programmable scanner, listening to the local police department. And then I found these crazy people in 2 meters talking about some really cool stuff and caught my interest. And I got my license.
Nice.
Here I am.
Nice. What about you, Steve?
So I've been licensed since 2013. I've had a family that was, kind of operating radio long before I was around. And, my brother really got me into the whole hobby because I saw a lot of the public service aspect of it. And, I was like, hey, you know what? I feel like, helping out and doing that sort of thing. And, I just started playing around with a whole bunch of digital modes and everything, and really got into the whole BBS side of it. Granted, it wasn't really as popular back in 2013, but it was still alive in the area. Send and receive messages, talk to people all over the world, kind of thing. That really got me going with the whole amateur radio stuff. And it's been a wild ride, meeting a lot of good people, made a lot of good friends, and now we're doing something completely new, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, definitely. So have either of you ever had to use amateur radio for like your jobs or for just in general? Like, have you had to use it outside of like the hobby?
I think amateur radio led me into my previous career. I had recently retired from law enforcement, where I spent 23 plus years. And growing up as a kid, it wasn't a job that I ever had on my radar. But as I got older and I would listen to the local police and fire all the time, I figured that would be something that I'd be interested in. And that's what happened with me.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, for me, the electric or the electrical engineering side of it definitely plays into my job a little bit. Being a systems admin, I'm playing with tech all day long, so I get to see like all the new stuff in being developed in amateur radio, and then I'm like, hey, how can I apply this to something that I'm working on over at work, or doing amateur radio has also brought me into actually doing the radios for my job. So we have a commercial license that we use, and I'm the one that coordinates the frequencies and maintains the radios and all that other fun stuff too. So yeah, amateur radio does enter in my daily life quite a bit.
That's cool. So I guess going from that, so let's talk about M17, because I think that's what everyone's here for. So explain like I'm 5 what M17 is.
All right, I'll start off. Yeah, M17, we're a community of open source developers and radio enthusiasts, and we're trying to build an understandable radio system in support of the hacker and experimenter's history of ham radio. As far as I'm concerned, I believe the ham radio operators were the first so-called hackers out there. So we're currently focused on creating an open source digital voice and data mode for radio. The current modes that are out there, they're mostly derived from commercial systems such as DMR and P25, or have some really proprietary systems such as Fusion, or some of them are kind of open with some proprietary components like D-Star. So what we're trying to do is we want to make it a completely open source system, and everything is out there in the open. And we're using a free codec, which is the important thing. We're using codec 2. So most of the radios that you're buying, a good portion of the amount that you're paying for the radio goes to the licensing fee to the codec manufacturer.
Yeah, so that makes sense, I guess. So basically, from my understanding, is you're trying to do what everyone else is doing as far as the digital side, but you're trying to make it free and open source for anybody to implement into a radio or a hotspot or anything like that.
Exactly.
Or even a phone, for that matter.
And not only that, but we're also trying to make it easier. There are really good points that the other radio modes currently have. D-Star seems to be pretty easy to link up and, get to other repeaters and everything like that. DMR has an interesting way of doing talk groups, and Fusion has, a pretty good room system and linking up and everything like that. So what we're trying to do is take the best from everyone else and put it into one system and make it easier for everybody to understand.
So Mike asked us, I was asking this a little bit later, has any manufacturers shown interest in M17 yet?
So as far as commercial manufacturers are concerned, I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to say anything specific. There have been talks with other groups that are related to M17 that have been, talking with some manufacturers that are out there, not necessarily a commercial manufacturer, not necessarily an amateur manufacturer, but we can say that there are some ideas of having a manufactured radio provided. But one of the things that M17 wants to really focus on is have you build the radio. We're trying to find people that are interested in fixing the TR9, which is the radio that was originally started by Wojciech, who was really the founder of the whole M17 thing. He created this little radio, and it's basically just a couple of circuit boards sandwiched together with an antenna sticking out of it. And Ed likes to say that that's what piqued his interest when he first heard about us. So we really want the amateurs to build the radios. We don't necessarily. I mean, sure, the whole protocol and specification are free and open source, and anybody can use it. But we really want to see what the amateurs can do with the hardware.
Okay. So is this going to be like accessible, like someone like me, where I know basically nothing about how to build a radio or, a digital radio? Would it be accessible to someone like me?
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're a community-driven group. We're very active on our Discord channel. There's plenty of people there, pretty much 24 hours a day. You'll find somebody that's involved with the team in one form or another in our Discord. There are plenty of implementations out there right now that people have been playing with to get themselves into M17. So I'm not the tech guy in the group by any means, but I have Steve here who's been walking me through a ton of stuff, and it's relatively pretty easy to get into if you just need to sit down, discuss it with the guys, and you can get into it just using a little hotspot or your cell phone. So there's definitely opportunity for people to get in there, get involved, and get their implementation of it up and running with the help of the community.
So cool stuff. Yeah, definitely cool stuff. Because with DMR, for instance, I know there's a lot of newbie struggle with the code plugs and just getting it to work, even on DroidStar. Like I don't know if you guys are subscribed to that group's IO, but every day, boop, 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 not working. So, yeah, no, it's good to hear that there's like an active community behind this, because kind of feels like with some of the other modes, it's kind of like, yeah, figure it out. There's a bunch of stuff out there.
So going back to DMR for a minute, like I said earlier, I've been licensed for over 28 years. I took my the normal hiatus that most ham radios take and get away from the hobby for a little bit. I got away from the hobby for about 18 or 19 years, and I came back and I went to a ham fest, and I got sold a $100 DMR radio. And I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. New digital mode, DMR. I have no idea what it's about. And I go home and I could not figure out how to make a code plug. It was just so convoluted. And I spent hours upon hours watching YouTube videos and reading every web page I could and going to Reddit and whatever. And it just wasn't making sense. It wasn't clicking in my head. And then finally, like 3 weeks into this learning process, I'm sleeping and I wake up about 4 a.m. and everything just made sense at that point. And I got up and I made my first code plug at like 4 a.m. with one eye open. And it definitely wasn't a pleasant experience. So when I found this group here, I'm like, this is exactly what I'm looking for, a community of like-minded individuals that are here to help each other and get involved in some cutting-edge technology. So
cool. So Mike is asking again, can you build a node like All-Star and use regular VHF or like a hotspot?
I'll go ahead and take that, Ed. Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the reflectors that the M17 project runs has a module that's linked to my All-Star node. It's actually a node in the sky, in the cloud, and it's connected to Echolink, and it's also connected to M17 module Charlie, and that's what we hold our nets on. Ed and I, when we're on the net, Ed's usually the net control. Sometimes I take over if he's unavailable. We're coming in through All-Star using an analog radio. And that's one of the great things about M17 is that you can actually have that analog to digital, transcoding without needing anything extra. So if you're transcoding to something like DMR, Fusion, D-Star, one of the other digital modes, you need to have like an ambi stick, like an ambi chip that you plug in order to do the transcoding, in order to do it legally. M17, you don't need that. It's all software and it's free to use. So building that All-Star node with a cross-mode tool called USRP to M17, you have that bridge to go from analog to digital, and you're on the M17 network, and anybody that's using an M17 capable client or radio can hear you. We've used it extensively for the net. We also ran it when we were down at Hamcation in Orlando. There was my Sherry node was my Sherry node there? Yeah, it was. My Sherry node was there, and that's how I was keeping in contact with everybody at the in the project and on our Discord server. I just pick up my analog radio. Actually, I bought a specifically bought an FT65 just so that I'd have a decent radio that I could use for that All-Star node that was plugged into M17. So yes, there is a way. There is a wiki article which I can provide the link for that explains the process of how to build in that cross mode into All-Star.
Nice. So can you tell us some of the distinct advantages, like other than it being open source? Like what are some advantages? Like you kind of mentioned before, how it's software based, but what are some other advantages to M17 over, let's say, like DMR, P25, that kind of stuff?
Steve, I'll start off real quick. I know it's like beating a dead horse here, but open source, I think, is the number one greatest thing about M17. It's all the codes out there, and you're free to implement it into whatever you'd like to do with it. I'm going to just reverse back to Mike's question earlier, and he said about commercial manufacturers. Right now, if you're familiar with the Mobilink TNC units, WX90 has these awesome units. It's the TNC3, and he's built firmware for these units that run M17. So we kind of have a commercial manufacturer out there supporting M17 as it is, and I'm sure Steve will get into it a little bit later on about some of his experimenting with M17 over the TNCs. So, Steve, I'm going to pass it over to you, and you can finish that question.
I'm going to be honest with you. I was looking up that information for the All-Star Bridge. Would you mind repeating the question again?
So I was saying, you mentioned that it's open source and that it's software-based. What's some other distinct advantages M17 has over other digital voice modes?
Sure. So yeah, like Ed said, I mean, the one biggest thing, of course, is the open source nature of M17. I feel that it's going to be much simpler to implement for the end user and also use by the end user. One of our sister projects that's working with us is called OpenRTX, and they're building firmware for existing radios that make basically that radio, such as the MD380, 390, like the one that Ed's holding right there, easier for the end user to use, as well as also open up the possibility of doing M17 with that radio. Just a small hardware modification. You put in a jumper wire, you put in a resistor, you take off a couple extra parts that aren't needed, and you have a fully functioning M17 HT. Well, I say fully functioning. Transmit works, receive is still being worked on. But because you can easily build it into a hotspot, you can easily build it into a radio. That's one of the biggest selling points for me with M17, because now I don't have to, I'm not at the mercy of a larger network like Brandmeister. I'm not at the mercy of a larger system like XLX or Fusion or, any of the other systems that are out there. Everything already exists, and it's just a matter of tweaking it here, there, and you're up and running with M17. It's for me, it's simple. For most people that come in, they have a couple of general questions on, okay, well, I'm seeing this. We answer it, and it's taken care of, and they're up and running as well. It's an amazing mode, and the other thing that I like to kind of say is that, for me at least, Codec 2 is easier to listen to than anything coded by Ambi. There's much more dynamic range for the voice with Codec 2, namely because it was being used as it was originally developed as a higher bitrate mode, but then David Rowe and the other programmers that were working on Codec 2 basically brought that bitrate down and down and down and down, and you still need to maintain that clarity, and Codec 2 does a really good job of keeping that clarity of the voice for the listener. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
Well, that's really cool. So actually, that's something I didn't even know, that you guys are going to more or less make it possible for a lot of users that already have a digital capable radio and bring it over to M17. I think that's huge because, something we see often in the ham radio world is the manufacturer will come up with something and then they'll just sell it, and they won't make it open source or nothing like that. So I think that's pretty huge personally.
Yeah, we're like I said earlier, we're a global team of like-minded individuals that are contributing to this on all sorts of fronts. And like Steve had mentioned, OpenRTX.org, that's our a sister project with us, that they're based out of Italy, and they're writing this custom firmware for not only the TYT MD380 and 390 lines of radios, but some of the other cheaper imported DMR radios. So it's definitely out there for the person that wants to experiment a little bit, not afraid of bricking a radio to reflash it with new firmware. So, and Pat, I also believe that projects like this and like the OpenRTX projects, we're going to help bring in the next generation of hams. The younger group of guys that aren't afraid of breaking a $90 radio and they're not afraid of opening up a computer and running Linux and, flashing custom firmware into their radios and updating their little MMDVM boards with the newest version of MMDVM that runs M17. This is the new version of homebrewing is right here. And we might not be winding coils anymore, but we're ripping firmware and modifying radios. So I definitely believe that this is going to play a big part in the future of ham radio and getting in the next generation and keeping them busy and active.
Yeah, because like you guys said early on, like, ham radio, like, basically invented hackers, but all the hackers kind of moved the computers, and now we need to move them back to ham radio. So I think you're kind of right in that sense where you're definitely going to get, like, computer savvy minded people interested in the hobby where they're like, oh, I can tinker, with a Linux based system and, mess around with a radio with Linux. Like, that's pretty cool because it's only like in recent history, really, where computers started going onto radios. Like, that's probably the last, 20 years or so?
Yeah, maybe. So, yeah. But, Steve mentioned earlier we were down at Hamcation, and I had the opportunity to speak to Dave Minster from the ARRL. And one of the things that I mentioned to him was the hacker community. And I think it's an untapped resource that the ARRL has yet to really address. There are a ton of ham radio operators already in the hacker community and that have noticed our project. So it's definitely an avenue, I think, that needs to be driven down by the league to see that this is probably where the future of the hobby is. And there are a lot of people out there already that's, they're in between both of the computer aspect and the radio aspect of it. We just need to drag them a little bit more into the radio aspect and more into an open-minded and willing community of older hams, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'm curious to know, so have any, and maybe you can't talk about this, but have any like commercial entities come interested about M17? So like public safety, military, that kind of thing. Obviously, if it's military, you can't say anything. But.
Yeah. So actually, speaking of Hamcation, I mean, it's the most recent thing is fresh in my mind. We were down at Hamcation. That's how most of our stories are going to start, Ed. You realize that?
Well, so soon when we were down Dayton.
Well, yeah, we're going to go to Dayton, but we're probably not going to be a vendor there. We'll be walking around. You'll see us. Okay. But we were at Hamcation, and we had a group of 3 guys, local first responders, that were talking about, a system that they have that is basically like a tornado or hurricane or an early warning system for weather events, right? And they have a system that's based on EAS, which alerts the 911 center if there's any sort of weather coming in or any sort of event that needs to be addressed by that 911 call center. But it's not reliable. They get better results from a receiver at their home, but they don't have any way of getting that information from their receiver at home to the 911 center. So they were thinking, okay, we could probably do it over DMR. We could probably do it over packet radio. We could probably do it over, whatever. They come across, our table, started asking us questions. They're actually going to take a look at one of their alert radios. Basically, it's got a little switch in there that closes a relay. Once that relay closes, goes right into a Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi itself can transmit M17 using RPi-TX out over to the out over the air, and they can receive it there at the 911 center. So they may have a better reliable connection to that EAS system without having to get any hardware from the state or county or town, whatever that 911 center is, just by using a Raspberry Pi and M17. So There's been some interest with first responders. Yes, there have been commercial entities that are not necessarily manufacturers, but they are users of digital radios and stuff that have said, hey, this new M17 thing, is this just an amateur radio thing? No, it's not. It doesn't have to be. I mean, it's being developed by amateur radio operators, but that's just a fraction of the people that are interested in what we're doing. I mean, it's not just ham radio operators. It's like we say, it's hackers. It's the people that are interested in radio, people that are playing around with RF, not necessarily amateurs, but they're definitely interested in what's going on and spreading the word for us and getting that interest outside of just the amateur radio community. Yeah.
So also, Pat, although we can't use it here in the United States, M17 does support a strong encryption system that can be utilized. So for countries on the ham radio side that have no issues with encryption, they can use it there. Or this can be rolled into a more of a commercial or first responder type of radio system due to that encryption.
Okay. Well, it could even be used by law enforcement and agencies where they don't want you to hear what they're talking about.
It's so kind of like security through obscurity, where nobody's got a whole lot of experience with the M17 protocol just yet, so we're people are able to get their messages sent and received without anybody listening in.
Yeah, no, I think this could be really good for rural public safety departments, because they're usually on a very limited budget. And I'm actually a volunteer firefighter out here, and the radios we have, they told me they're like $2,000 a unit. So I could definitely see, I think most of that too, like you were saying earlier, is the proprietary, software on it. So yeah, that would definitely be really good for public safety, even amateur radio for that matter, because we should really work on getting the cost of these units down, because let's face it, like $300 radios aren't exactly attractive to college students. So
right. Yeah, M17 is really good with keeping things inexpensive. You don't need to pay, or the manufacturer of whatever radio that supports M17 won't have to pay a large corporation a ton of money to license their proprietary codec and put it into their radios. M17, you just look at the code, look at the spec. As long as you stay within that, you'll have an interoperable radio with anything else that speaks M17. So that drives the cost down quite a bit by being free and open source. Yes.
So do you foresee, since it'll be free and open source, do you foresee possibly Chinese manufacturers getting their hands on it and start building some radios?
So that's an interesting thing to say. I hope that they do, because that will take the burden of producing a functional piece of hardware from the project and put it onto their shoulders. It's a lot of people say, oh, well, we don't want, the Far East manufacturers, taking our stuff and running amok with it. I hope that they do, because, in the global scale of things, it will definitely breed a lot of competition and drive the costs down even more. If you can, build an M17 radio for, pennies on the dollar kind of thing, then, another manufacturer that's, a little bit more, well known will pick it up and say, well, we want to build this radio and start making a couple of bucks off of it as well. But they can sell them for, $10 from China. It would definitely bring the costs down even further. So I hope that a manufacturer over there will eventually take a look and say, hey, let's go ahead and make a radio.
Yeah, I think that would be like the turning point, because there's China, so they'll just take it anyways. Even if it was proprietary, they'll take it anyways and throw it on a radio.
even think of like the MMDVM modems, the little hotspots that everybody uses.
Mm-hmm.
They're so prolific because, manufacturers in China were able to, take the work that had been done and, just start manufacturing all these hotspots. And now everybody and their brother seems to have a hotspot now. Granted, they're probably running DMR Fusion. Yeah, I literally
Mine's over here somewhere.
I look over my shoulder and there's like 3 of them.
Yeah.
But that disconnect happens because you go ahead and you buy a multi-mode digital hotspot. Now you have to buy the radio to go with it too. So you're getting double ding there. Because now you got to spend. I think the AT878, the Anytone one is like $200, $220, something like that.
It's like 300 now.
Yeah, it's a little bit more now
because they upgraded it.
Oh, really? So yeah, I mean, you got to buy not only $100 hotspot, but now you got to buy a $300 radio to pair with it. And I'm telling you that FT5DR and the ID52, those things are just. I mean, it's a $700 radio for that thing. And the only thing that you get out of it is analog and D-Star, and who the heck still uses D-Star?
Yeah.
Apparently.
There's the one guy.
Yeah. I mean, I have a 5100 in my car, but I unplugged it and I plugged a D710 in, and now so the only thing I have right now is analog, and if I use like a TNC, I can have M17 on it. So I don't even use the 5100 anymore. It's kind of sad. I kind of wish I had a use for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say, like, I just don't understand the major manufacturer logic of, hey, their competitors in the Far East are making for $25 a pop, so we're going to raise the price. It's like, what? Doesn't make any sense. So I'm kind of glad, like,
a good portion of that money is the licensing fee to DVSI.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that's true.
Chips, it's very pricey, and those chips aren't available to Joe consumer at all. So,
I mean, you can ask for them, but I think one of the people that works with us on the project, he said that he was buying them direct from DVSI actually, and eventually they said, we're not going to sell any more to you unless you buy them in bulk of 100,000 or something, so some ridiculous number like that. So even the stock that he had, he's like, I can't do this anymore, and I can't buy 100,000 chips from them. So that's why. Not only the licensing, but also because they require you to buy so many at one shot. And then now you got to build all those radios in order to justify the cost of all the chips that you bought. So it's kind of a very fine balance between how cheap can we sell this and how many do we have to build in order to make a profit, kind of thing.
So How long has M17 been going on? Like, I actually should have asked that earlier. So how long has this project been going on?
So M17 started somewhere in 2019. And like we said earlier, it started in Poland by Wojciech Marczkowski. I mispronounced his name, I'm sure. Kaczmarski.
Yeah.
SC5WWP. So he started it, and started it with one of his local clubs. And he went out there and he threw it in a couple of the online forums. I think it was Reddit, the first place he had mentioned it.
Yeah.
And it just kind of he just started building his little team of people from all over the globe that are like-minded and willing to help and contribute to the project. So it's been around for about 3 years or so now.
Okay. So since its inception, how big is the team now?
So
so you've got Wojciech, who's the head of the whole thing. You got myself and Ed, and you also have Mike, W2FBI, here in the United States, that are directly involved with M17 pretty much 24/7. We've got a few people on the OpenRTX project. Those guys, they do their own thing, but we work with them quite closely. So for like hardware and stuff, DB9 MAT of the MMDVM modem fame, he's building stuff for us. Most recently, the Module 17 Smart Mic module that we're putting together. Doug 88DP, who does DroidStar, he's part of our team. We've got WX9O, Rob from Mobile Linked. He's definitely a great mentor and a person to have around. He's helped us with the protocol quite a bit. And then you've got Tom N7TAE. He's the one that developed the first M17 reflector system called MREF-D. It's based off of XLXD. He also created the first M17 internet client called mVoice, which runs on Linux. So if you got like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, you can download mVoice and put it on there, plug in a headset, and now you're on the M17 network. Those are the main players in the project, but we've got a community of well over what?
I was just going to mention Jonathan as well.
Oh, Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan, G4KLX. He's done a lot of work with M17. It would not be in MMDVM unless Jonathan helped us out with it. So, hotspots and MMDVM modems, that firmware now has M17 support. He also created M17 Client, which is a software-based radio control radio. So basically, if you have an MMDVM modem or a hotspot, M17 Client can turn whatever you have into like an HT. So like I have a ZumSpot Elite kit, which has basically the screen built into a Raspberry Pi case and an MMDVM hotspot built into it. I'm going to take M17 Client, I'm going to put it on that, and I'm going to basically turn that Raspberry Pi into a M17 HT based off of Raspberry Pi. And then we got, I think it's close to 500 people. We're getting close to 500 people on our Discord. We have a large group of people on Matrix as well. There's a few people that poke in their heads from IRC. All that's linked together. All that those three different systems are linked together. A lot of people following us on Twitter, putting in their comments and questions there. So, I mean, when we talk about, team, I consider the whole community the team. We couldn't do it without
source.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody can contribute. It's all on GitHub. So, if you see something, you want to change something, or you want to kind of develop off of it, or you want to help us out, just submit a pull request. We'll review it and put it together and put it into the system for you. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be just us that are listed on the website. It can be anybody that wants to, put their, feet in the water and have a swim with us.
I'm going to add something, a contribution from one of our members, M0IEI, Pedro. Pedro is based in the UK now, and he came up with a piece of hardware to work off of Jonathan's M17 client. And I just got this here stateside the other day. This is his little, you have one coming with you, Steve. This is his little board that he put together to run M17 client, and he calls this the OPI M17, and this sits on top of a Orange Pi, an Orange Pi Zero, and this particular board will hook up to a Kenwood RJ45 microphone, and also interface with the radio with 9600 board data support. So this should be up and running in the next couple of weeks or so, and I'm sure we'll have some videos on our YouTube channel and our Twitter page when this becomes live here in the States. But if you look up Pedro, we'll give you some links, Pat, that you can add to your notes as well, and you can see some of the implementations of members of our community and what they've done and how they've implemented M17 into their projects.
Yeah, I'll definitely put the Discord link in the description for the video, so that way people can hop on there. So, because that'd be really cool. So, it sounds like really M17 is kind of getting geared to work amongst all of your devices, right? Like all of your radios, all of your computers, phones, all of that, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, sure. Mentioning the phones, we're going to go back to where were we? Hamcation, and we had some Android cell phones that were not running on Wi-Fi, and they were in airplane mode. And we had these Zoom Spot MMDVM USB sticks hooked up to the phones. We had two of them running, and Steve and I, we were communicating over RF. Granted, this is only probably a quarter of a watt, but we were able to talk, right through DroidStar on our phone, actually using RF. So to the old timers out there, it actually was radio.
Yeah.
Wow.
Real radio.
That's actually really cool. It's actually really cool because I know there was like a similar project, like an Android app, I remember, and you could talk to people off of the internet and just use, I think, Bluetooth. But it's kind of cool that now you've implemented like RF into the equation now. So now you could almost kind of have a covert conversation with somebody.
And again, if it wasn't for, multiple members of our community, such as Doug, AD8DP, with his DroidStar app, and Jonathan for putting M17 into the MMDVM software, it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm betting you guys are hoping that you're going to reach out more into like the Linux community and the hacker community and all those folks, huh?
So we are planning on making an appearance at DEF CON this year in Vegas.
I know what that is.
Yeah. We also have a talk submitted for Hackers on Planet Earth in July, which is another hacker conference from 2600 Magazine. And I just said in July in New York. So we're hoping to have those two talks and to reach out to, another whole set of ham radio operators or potential hams who are intrigued by the whole open source part of this and, the ability to eventually, cobble together your own radio, whichever way you see fit.
Yeah, I know the open source community is a very tight-knit, self-supporting community.
Kind of has to be by nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is a really cool project because I don't think there's really anything else out there like it, right? I mean, you said you have the folks in Italy, but
So on the HF side, we have FreeDV, which is digital voice mode that's also open source for the HF bands, and it's also based on codec too. And those guys do their thing down there on HF. And I haven't used FreeDV at all, but I hear they have a pretty active community as well. So
I've actually only briefly heard of it. So
yeah, we're shooting for the VHF, UHF, and microwave crowds. We have some interest in a couple of the collegiate clubs that are looking to use M17 on some of their satellite work in the future. So
that would be a good use, I guess. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, we've Wojciech himself has been able to shoot M17 towards QO100, the satellite that's the GeoSat that's above the Europe and Middle East and down there to Africa. He's also used M17 over EchoStar. EchoStar, which one was it? 21 or something? Yeah, I don't know which number it was, but a couple of GeoSats were used for transmitting and receiving M17. He's got a new antenna that he's very proud of that he's going to be using for low Earth orbit satellites as well, which is hopefully going to be effective. Some of the interesting things that are happening with OpenRTX is going to make working satellites from an HT a whole lot easier as well. And if we can shoot M17 at a LEO satellite, then great. You've got the trifecta there. You got a good radio, you got a good digital radio mode, and you got a satellite. So now you can make contacts using VHF and up a lot further than what you could with just a repeater.
Yeah, that's actually really cool, and that would actually, you think about like the whole thing. It's really good for people just coming into the hobby because this is all like at the technician level. You can do all of this stuff.
Yes.
And that's what's really important is giving techs, an avenue to do more and more stuff because they're so limited on what they can do as far as the bands they can use.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in as a tech, you have all those microwave frequencies available to you and plenty of experimenting to do up there.
Yeah.
Just
no one does it. Yeah.
One of the things I want to see more M17 on 220. I want to really get going on 220 around here because I'm telling you that it is a really quiet band, at least in this area, because it's so close to the military and air bands. So nobody uses it. And unfortunately, if we don't use it, the FCC may take it away. So here in the States, I want to see more 220 use for M17. Make 220 the M17 band.
Yep. Yeah, 220 is definitely an underutilized band, that's for sure.
So another project, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I'm sorry, Patrick. So another project, M17 we have in the background is the M17 Northeast Lab that's about to be populated in a few months.
You keep reminding me that.
So last year, we had gotten a grant from ARDC, who gave us some money to help us do some research and development with M17. And one of the things we've done with some of that grant money is we're building a little lab setup up in New Hampshire, which will be open, by appointment to people if you want to come up and play around and use some of our test equipment. Reach out to us and we'll make that.
Or even have, something sent up to us so that we can test it or, play around with it for you, it's just going to be a lot of work, Ed. We're going to be up, building that thing out for a couple of months, but it should be a really nice setup once it's done.
Yeah, that would be really cool. So I guess the final question I have, before we ask any questions from the audience, is what's the end goal for M17? Or what's its overall objective?
For me, I don't see any end to M17. I want to see M17 continue into the future. I want to see M17 become a much bigger community overall, not necessarily just with VHF, RHF, or VHF, UHF, and digital voice modes. I want to see us building more radios and having more fun with the amateur radio hobby in general. And, right now it's let's be the best digital mode that's available to the amateur radio operator. We don't want to have, people using proprietary systems that are a pain in the butt to use. And, you got to spend an hour and a half putting together a code plug just to get onto the air and then realize that, oh, shoot, my color code's wrong. And now I'm never going to get into this repeater until I plug it back into the computer. Having something front panel programmable is a whole lot easier. But yeah, I see M17 being the digital mode, not necessarily just digital voice mode, but the digital mode to use for amateur radio.
And I would like to see the handheld radio that Wojtek had worked on earlier, the TR9. I'd like to see that come to light. I want to build that radio. I want to use the surface mount soldering techniques. I want Steve to print me a 3D case for the radio, and I want a radio that I can actually say that I put together. I put together and I know how it works. I know what's going on under the hood. I know what's making it tick. And if something screws up, I'm able to, download the firmware, tweak it up a little bit, and I never have to worry about an end of life of the product because we're directly involved with it, and there's a community that's directly involved with it. So that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I'll kind of open up to the audience. I know Mike had to leave, but if anyone else has questions, and if you guys have anything you want to add about M17 that maybe I didn't ask or anything cool, interesting you're doing.
We have we're going to be at the Nearfest Hamfest in Deerfield, New Hampshire, April 29th and 30th, I want to say.
So I'm going to have
the last Friday and Saturday in April. So if you happen to be up in New Hampshire, stop by and see us. We're going to have a lot of demos and implementations going on. We'll have that OPI module. We'll have the Module 17 up and running. We'll have our cell phones with the USB sticks up and running. Hopefully, as it gets closer, the firmware for the MD380 should be near completion by that time, we're hoping. So we may have the modified MD380 working into a hotspot. So a little bit further down the line, Steve and I, we're going to be at Hamvention. Well, I'm going to be there. Steve most likely will be. We won't be there representing M17, but you'll see us because we'll have our M17 swag on, and we'll have some goodies to give away if you find us and see us. We got some stickers and pins and whatnot. So, like I said, we have a couple of conventions over the summer, including DEF CON, and most of that stuff will be recorded. So, definitely hoping by July we'll have a lot more progress into the project that we can go out there and tout.
Cool. Yeah, so it sounds like you guys have a lot going on and probably even more in the future after that. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, definitely busy with this project.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
Consuming.
A lot of fun too. I don't want to say that it's, that it's difficult to do. It's a lot of fun to do, but there's also a lot of stuff that we're, Ed and I and Mike are just, sometimes it feels like herding cats, but other times, you sit back, you relax, and you kind of take a look at what's going on in the chat room, and you're just saying, wow, this is an amazing community that we got going on. And, let's see how far we can really take this, because it's definitely something that's needed, like that shot in the arm for amateur radio that's needed in order to keep things going.
Yeah,
it definitely sounds like a labor of love. That's for sure.
The community is the best part of it. We have a really great, strong, helpful community out there, and we have some serious channels going on our Discord, and then we have something that we just BS and laugh, in a couple of our channels. Steve and I, we were pretty much strangers up until about a year or so ago before we met in person. But we talk every day, and mostly everybody on the team, we kind of communicate at some point or another.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it here because there's no questions in the chat, and we've gone for about an hour. So, yeah, it's been great talking to you guys. I've learned a lot. I think M17 is an awesome project. I think anyone that listens to this on replay needs to go and check it out. Check out the links I'm going to put for them in the description. I already have your website up. I'll put up your Discord and anything else you want me to put up there. So, definitely go check these folks out, and I really appreciate you guys being on the podcast this evening.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, no problem. All right, well, 7-3s, and we'll talk to everybody later.
7-3.